Welcome to the Clovis Church of Christ Sermon Podcast. Thank you for listening.
Okay, we are studying the Gospel of Matthew, and I'm going on the assumption that a lot of the basics of Matthew you already know. And I'm also going on the assumption that before this class is over, I'm going to mess this up. And I say it for this reason. I always start out with good intentions when I try something like this. Somebody suggested, why don't we have lesson sheets to hand out? And I almost never do that because I've always noticed when you hand them out, they're left in the pews. And so it's just counterproductive sometimes. But we are going to have lesson sheets, maybe not on every lesson, but we're going to give it a shot and see how it works out. So after class is over, if you're interested in the lesson sheet, pick one up. They're at the front. Also, I truly believe that if you have a folder to put the lesson sheets in, you are less likely to lose them. So after class is over, pick up the first lesson sheet, pick up the folder, and then we take off from there, and we hope that we can keep that going and I don't forget it. I'll ask my wife to remind me that I'm committed to making lesson sheets. She'll remind me of that. All right, we are studying the Gospel of Matthew. What can you tell me about Matthew? What do you know about him as a person? The most obvious point that we remember about Matthew is he is an apostle. The second most obvious point, he's a tax collector. Let's go to Matthew 9 and verse 9. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting in the tax collector's booth. Now, if you flip over one more page, chapter 10, verse 3, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector. So when we are talking about Matthew, we remember that his occupation had been a collector of taxes. So how popular is that going to make him in society? He is not going to be a popular individual because Jews looked at other Jews who worked for the Romans as somehow betraying their country and betraying their fellow citizens because they were notorious for over-collecting on taxes. It had to do with their profit margin. Now, interesting fact also, what's Matthew's other name? It's also known as Levi. Does Matthew ever tell us that? Never does. The only way you know that he's also known as Levi is from looking at Mark and Luke. Now, why Matthew didn't want to put that out there, I have no idea. But it was something that he did not make known in his gospel. And when we look at his gospel, there are certain assumptions that are almost always made about Matthew's gospel. Assumption number one, it's the first gospel that was written, the first one recorded. When I say the synoptic gospels, what do I mean? And I'll ask for a volunteer. Scott? Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Why are they called synoptic, Mirthaline? It's familiar writing, and how is it written? I mean, is it written, what do they all have in common? Synoptic means similar. They tell the story of Jesus, just the story, events as they occurred. In other words, if somebody were to say, hey, give me a timeline on the life of Jesus, each of them would pretty much give you that line. John was the only one that was different. And of the three synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it is believed that Matthew was written first. And what's the major reason behind that? Why would we say that? It's believed that Matthew was written first. Why would we say that?
I guess because it's to the Jews are the first to receive the gospel. Is that correct?
It is geared toward Jewish readers when you look at it. And in a minute, we'll put some things up on the screen that causes us to understand that more. Now, that can be overblown a little bit. A lot of commentators will look at Matthew and say it's obviously written at a time when most Christians were Jews, because there's so much Jewish material in there, just like it's apparent that Luke was written to Gentiles, and there's reasons for that. But like I say, that's overblown a little bit, because when you read Matthew, there's obviously some Gentile-type material, and when you read Luke, there's also obviously some Jewish-type material. But each of them definitely have a leaning. Matthew leads toward a Jewish reader. Luke tends to read toward a Gentile reader. Now, when we talk about why do we say Matthew was written with a Jewish audience in mind? Simple things to remember. Number one, writes of things that would be of concern to a Jew. Now, when you look at Matthew chapter 1, what do you see right off the bat? That you know if I'm Jewish, I'm concerned about this. You go right into the genealogy of Jesus, where he came from. Next thing, the number of Old Testament quotations. He is heavy on Old Testament quotations. And how soon in the Gospel of Matthew do you notice that? You don't get out of the first 2 chapters without pow, 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 pow. Now, as we study Matthew, there'll be a lot of questions about how Matthew uses Old Testament quotations, and some of the answers I might not have. But it is an interesting study because he has all kinds of quotations from the Old Testament prophets. And the last thing, unexplained things that a Jew would just already know. Now, if you're reading the Gospel of Luke and you might come to a Jewish feast and he might explain it, is Matthew going to explain it? Probably not. In other words, I'm writing to a Jewish audience. When I say this, I just understand they're going to know what I'm talking about. Now, these were the things that kind of lead people to the idea that Matthew was written at a time in the history of the church when the church is still mostly Jewish. And so you have these things that you are taking into consideration. And Matthew also has a point of emphasis, and this one you probably need to remember. If I were to say, why did John write his book? What was he trying to get across? Would everybody know what passage to turn to? Don't say it out loud. I want everybody to turn to the verse that we usually look at in the Gospel of John and say, okay, this is the purpose in John's writing. And there is a right answer on this one. John's purpose passage. And I'll ask for a volunteer. Steve, Brady raised his hand. Okay, Brady, what do you have there?
Therefore, many other signs Jesus also performed in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these have been written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name.
Yeah. John's pretty straightforward. I'm writing these things in such a way as to produce faith in people that Jesus is the Son of God. Now, when you look at Matthew, I mean, that's going to be incorporated in it. But if you go to Matthew 1 and verse 1, the record of the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Matthew really is going to stress the connection of Jesus to David. He's a son of David. He's the son of Abraham. Now, is that going to be important to a Jewish audience? It's critical. We might say if you're talking to a Jewish audience, that's the first cut. If you're going to tell me that's the Messiah, I have to know he's Jewish, and I've got to know he's a descendant of David. Now, as we get into the book itself, and this is on the first lesson, if we talk about the outline of the Gospel of Matthew that we're going to use, if you've been in many of my classes and we outline books, you know that I like simplicity, short outlines that we can kind of remember. Matthew is one of the hardest books to outline. I was looking at, there's a writer named R.C.H. Lenski, very famous commentator. He had 20 points in his outline on Matthew. We don't want 20 points. We want this. And it won't be the most sensical outline, but hopefully it's one that we can sort of remember. We're looking at it this way. The first 4 chapters, the beginning of Matthew's Gospel. And you notice I put, it's sort of the beginning, and we'll explain that for a second. Then chapters 5 through 13, sermon to sermon. What did I mean by sermon to sermon? What's in Matthew chapter 5? Sermon on the Mount begins in Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 13, what's that? Sermon in parables. Sermons concerning the kingdom of heaven. So for the sake of ease and memory, we go sermon to sermon, 5 through 13, and we'll look at that as a block. And if you look at that as kind of an artificial way to outline, it is, but when we get to the genealogy of Jesus, we're going to see that Matthew kind of took some artificial steps also. 14 and 15, it's about conflict, 16 through 20, going to Jerusalem. We could have put 14 through 20 all in one unit and made up a name for it, but we're going to look at it that way. And then 21 to 28, the ending, sort of the ending. Now you'll notice the beginning is sort of the beginning and the ending is sort of the ending. And when you look at the ending, when you say ending, that makes it appear like that's the end of the story of Jesus. Well, it's not, but it's the end of the Gospel of Matthew. So that's the way we put it. Now, one of the hardest things when you're writing a story is where do you begin? How do you get started? And the quickie answer is, well, you begin at the beginning. Well, why is it hard to begin at the beginning with Jesus? He did not have a beginning. Put a marker in Matthew 1 and turn back to Micah chapter 5. Now, this is a rhetorical question. In your mind, you will probably think of examples of what I'm about to talk about. But have you kind of noticed by keeping your ears open that some basic principles that we used to just assume that everybody knew are kind of slipping away and need to be reviewed once in a while? This point concerning Jesus, this is one that does have to be emphasized. He did not have a beginning. He was a pre-existent divine being. The prophet Micah, Micah 5 and verse 1, now muster yourselves in troops, daughters of troops. They have laid siege against us. With a rod they will smite the judge of Israel on the cheek. But as for you, Bethlehem Ephratah, too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you one will go forth for me to be ruler in Israel. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity. Right, who are we talking about? And how do you know? Mirthaline, who are we talking about and how do you know? How do you know? Say that a little bit louder. He's quoted in Matthew. Yeah, that's the easy way to say it. But if you look at the text, as for you, Bethlehem Ephratah, we're talking about the king that was going to come out from Bethlehem Ephratah. And his goings forth from the days of eternity. That's the kind of personage we are talking about when we are talking about Jesus. He did not have a beginning. He was an eternal divine being. Now, this is another one of John's points of emphasis. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, right off the bat, he's going to get into some things that he truly wants to stress about Jesus. The record of the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. First verse of the New Testament. Now from 2 to 16, that just fogs our brain when we get to looking at genealogies. But that first verse, the record of the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. The focal point of this gospel will be Jesus Christ, kingdom of heaven, the Messiah. Now, what I'm about to say doesn't have anything to do with the text. We're talking about the Gospel of Matthew, principal figure, Jesus Christ. So what is he to you? Okay, 2 words. Intellectually. When I say intellectually, what do I mean? What do you know about him in your head? The basic facts about Jesus. Well, you're going to learn a whole lot of basic facts in the Gospel of Matthew. Most of these facts we already know. Emotionally. Now what do I mean?
So, like, what does it mean to you?
What does he mean to me right there? I'm challenged. We threw the question out. I mean, what does he mean to you? Why are you here today? I'm 71. I'm not the oldest one in this class. I've been coming here a long time. Been doing this all my life that I can remember. Is it going to be because I memorized a set of facts, and because I memorized this set of facts, I've been here all this time? Chris?
You have to have knowledge of him in order to affect emotions.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really separate both of those. I mean, sometimes we try, but we do a pretty bad job separating those two. We don't need to. I think quite often we try to take knowledge and kind of separate those two, and we don't need to.
You can't separate it. I can't separate it. Most of us here can't separate it, but are there people that can kind of separate it? Brady.
I took a Bible literature class. A man who knew his Bible, I'm ashamed to say, better than I did. He knew it backwards, forwards, middle, out, everything. And no emotional connection. He knew everything about it. Yeah. But meant nothing to him in terms of emotion or faith.
Yeah.
It was a piece of literature.
Okay, don't raise your hand on this. This is like that in my thinking anyway. How many of you know parents who have children? That kid knows how good the parent has been to them. The kid has received blessings from the parent, favored by the parent, spoiled by the parent, and the kid knows all that and really feels nothing for the parents. Ever seen that? That's a possibility. And what I'm getting at is this. There's the facts we know in our head, and there's what we feel in our heart. It's possible. And the reason I say this, do some people wander away from the Lord, leave the path? Do they just go? Could they recite, Acts 2:38? Probably. They know the Bible teaches Jesus is God's Son, and they know the truth of the Scripture, and yet they wander away. Why? Because just because you know something intellectually doesn't mean you've got it written in your heart. The Hebrew writer, God would take His word and write it on their hearts. What's that mean? Not letters on a page, word written in your heart. It means something to you. When you think about Jesus, and we are getting into the Gospel of Matthew, the story of Jesus, the story of the kingdom of heaven, what we want from people, it means something to them. Sometimes, if you're listening to denominational people, a lot of times they'll talk about Jesus in your heart or some kind of comments, and sometimes you question whether or not they have a clue about it. But if we want to keep older people and younger people here, a lot of the key to this is not only do they know the story of Jesus, the facts about Jesus and who He is, but Jesus has to mean something to them. And Chris.
The scripture says, those who worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. That's intellectually and emotionally. That's that.
Yeah. And forgive me for this, I'm getting a little carried away at the moment. We have that statement, that's a big one. I get the picture in the beginning of the Revelation where there's the throne of God, and here the Lamb walks in. And everybody throws down their crown, before the throne of God. But do you ever stop and think about the day is going to come when this isn't just a story? You're going to stand before the judgment seat of Christ to receive for the things that you've done in the body. Brady?
Which is the motivation for splitting the intellectual and emotional. Because if you allow yourself to feel it, if you allow it to have meaning, that puts you in the uncomfortable position perhaps of having to do something.
Yeah.
And you may not want to do something. So if you split those off and know it intellectually but don't feel it or take it in, then you're relieved from having to do it.
Is Jesus going to ask you to do something? How much does He want from you? He wants all of it. He wants everything. That's a lot to ask. And the question we have is, why in the world do we give it to Him? The record of the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. That's who He is. We come into that right in the very beginning of the gospel. He asked us for our life, and He can do that because that's who He is. He's the one that the Old Testament prophets pointed to. He's the Christ. He's the Messiah. He's the Son of God. Yes.
So there have been times in my Christian walk as a Christian that the only reason I've been able to walk through the doors is because I knew who Jesus was intellectually only, because I had a firm foundation, and I lost 2 siblings, and that's hard to watch your parents go through something like that. And so I think that God's grace covers you when you're in that situation, but I think emotionally it's just as important. Also, like, I think it ebbs and flows, I guess is my point as a Christian. Like, sometimes you have to rely on your foundations and your intellectual, on paper knowledge of Jesus, and then other times it's easier to have a relationship with him. And
Could you go to the New Testament and find examples of people that ebbed and flowed and sometimes had trouble and had to be picked up?
So it's not always in balance, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. When we think of Jesus the Messiah, if you go back to Hebrews, we come boldly before the throne of grace because we understand that he was tempted at all points like as we are. We put him on that pedestal because God did. And yet he is approachable, and through him we approach God. And we want to understand, we want to understand that intellectually, but that comes in also. And how many in this room would kind of classify themselves as highly emotional people? I am too, you just don't know it. Doctor told me I was a phony one time because I appeared very, very passive, and yet my blood pressure was through the roof. We have all these things. We have the intellectual part, the emotional part. What we are asking for here is, I'm pretty convinced that a lot of you already have a handle on a lot of the material that's in the Gospel of Matthew. But what we want to do is take these stories and stop and think about the impact that these things ought to have on our hearts and the change it ought to make in us. Marcel?
Yeah, you have to feel it. Isaiah 53. Who has believed our report? And then you got to realize that the Jews kept a record of these genealogies. Then Paul talks about it in 1 Timothy 1:4. He said, don't quarrel over this stuff. Just believe it. It's written. It's there. Don't cause a problem.
Yeah. Well, here, if you talk about it's written, the genealogy, let's look at the genealogy in Matthew for a moment. First verse, the record of the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. All right. The genealogy, what's a genealogy? Family tree. That's all you're talking about, the list of descendants, the genealogy of Jesus. The old King James said Jesus Christ, which made every young person reading it first time thinking that was all a proper name. It wasn't. Jesus the Messiah. All right, we'll get to definition of Messiah in a second. The son of David, the son of Abraham. That is the abbreviated family tree. Who cares?
Well, you got to feel like you're part of that tree. You have to understand that you're here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's
All right.
prophecy.
It's prophecy. If you're Jewish, do you care? If you're Jewish, you really, really care about that family tree. And keep in mind that Matthew is written at a time when probably most of the members of the church are Jewish. There may be some others, but this is something that they would care about. Now, if you're Jewish, prior to the coming of Christ, you're looking for somebody. You're looking for a Messiah. Now, what 2 things does he have to be? You're Jewish, you're looking for the coming Messiah before Jesus ever comes. Now first, what expectations do they have for their Messiah? What's he going to do? He's going to be a king. World is going to go our way all of a sudden. We're going to be top dogs in the world. And we're looking for that guy that's going to do this. But he has to be a descendant of David. If he's not a descendant of David, he can't be the guy. Now, why would they say that? Okay, somebody, everybody, this is a universal assignment in this classroom. Find me a passage that would indicate that the Messiah had to be a descendant of David. Anybody have one? God's promises to David. The standard passage for God's promise to David is 2 Samuel chapter 7. The promises that God made to David. God promised David an everlasting what? Everlasting throne, an everlasting dynasty. Now, when you promise somebody an everlasting dynasty, what's a dynasty? Family rule. When somebody passes the kingship down to a son, who passes it on to his son, who passes it on to his son, who passes it on to his son, and nobody breaks the chain. No outsider comes in and wipes out the chain and takes over. God says, David, you have an everlasting dynasty, one that's going to last forever. That being the case, the Jews realized Messiah has to be a descendant of David. Let's go to Psalm 89. Psalm 89 and verse 34. My covenant I will not violate, nor will I alter the utterance of my lips. Once I have sworn by my holiness, I will not lie to David. His descendants shall endure forever, and his throne as the sun before me. It shall be established forever like the moon, and the witness in the sky is faithful. They understood that the Messiah has to be a descendant of David, has to be a descendant of Abraham. He's got to be Jewish. Now, of course, if he's a descendant of David, he is Jewish. That's kind of automatic. What made Abraham so special? Was there a Jewish nation before Abraham? All Jews trace their origin to Abraham. Everybody, keep your finger in Matthew and turn to Isaiah chapter 51. Isaiah 51 and verse 1. Listen to me, you who pursue righteousness, who seek the Lord. Look to the rock from which you were hewn and to the quarry from which you were dug. Look to Abraham your father and Sarah who gave birth to you in pain. Okay. He is the rock from which the Jewish nation is hewn. He's the quarry. In other words, here's Abraham. He is the father of the Jewish nation. Before him, there is no Jewish nation. With Abraham, God handcrafts a nation. He goes to the trouble to make a nation. And why does he want to go to the trouble to make a nation? What's the long-range plan? Long-range plan is to bring Jesus into the world. So that makes him important. Genesis chapter 12, the promises God gave to Abram. In Abram, all nations of the earth would be blessed. So if you're Jewish, these concepts, that's the first cut. You're telling me somebody's the Messiah, the first thing I want to know, is he Jewish? Is he a descendant of David? If he's not, don't even bother to talk to me about him. Well, why is Matthew writing here? Jesus makes the cut. The first thing they want to know, that's what he wants to discuss. Now, The family tree in verses 2 through 16. We're not going to go through every name. It'd be kind of pointless. But there are some things that are kind of funny about this list. It is an abbreviated list. Not every name shows up in the list. It's abbreviated. Now, here's how I know that. Number one, you just make a little comparison between the Gospel of Luke and Matthew 1. Luke's Gospel. Luke starts with Joseph and backs clear up to God. He goes all the way. Joseph was a descendant of Zerubbabel, who lived at the time of the deportation to Babylon, who was a descendant of David, who was a descendant of Abraham, who was a descendant of Adam, God. He follows that Joseph clear back to God in the Garden of Eden. Now, somebody said, well, why would he be interested in doing that? If you're writing to the Gentiles, you're emphasizing that Jesus is Son of God. Then we come to Matthew 1. If you notice the 16th verse, what we are showing here, come down to Joseph. Back up 14 generations to the deportation to Babylon. Back up 14 generations to King David. Back up 14 generations to Abraham. 14, 14, 14. Why do it that way? It's a memory gimmick. If you're wanting somebody to remember something for simple purposes, you do some kind of a memory gimmick. 14, 14, 14. Now, I know that there were names left out, say for instance, between David and the deportation. Look, if you would, at chapter 1 and verse 8. Asa was the father of Jehoshaphat, Jehoshaphat the father of Joram, and Joram the father of Uzziah. Who remembers their king's list well enough to know what's going on here? There are 4 names left out of that chain. If you look at Jehoshaphat, after Jehoshaphat, there was Jehoram, Ahaziah, Athaliah, Joash, and Amaziah before you get to Uzziah. Why leave them out?
They're not worth mentioning.
They may not be worth mentioning, but there's a lot of them that weren't worth mentioning. You want this list to come out to 14. Now, when you do it his way, do you still show descent through David? Still do, so it works out. When you look at verse 11, Josiah became the father of Jeconiah and his brothers at the time of the deportation to Babylon. Josiah became the father of Jeconiah. That's a funny way to put it. Real funny way to put it. Actually, Jehoiakim was the father of Jeconiah. So there are places in the chain here that some guys were just left out, so we make it come out to 14. Now, do you think that these people didn't know who the kings were? They knew them. This is put together as, here it is, we show the link between Joseph, clear back up to Abraham and David. Now, again, what we are trying to show, and we are showing, Jesus related to David, related to Abraham, and we're furnishing enough information so that you know that such is the case. Now, so if you go back to chapter 1 and verse 16, Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, by whom Jesus was born, who is called the Messiah. We are going through Joseph. Now think about Joseph for a minute. Does it ever seem to you like he does not get his due in the New Testament?
He disappeared
He disappears. But I mean, even in our thinking and our talk, we don't talk about him much. It's kind of like I brought this up in class the other day. Moses and Joshua. Was Joshua an important figure? Really, really, really important. But compared to Moses, which one do we remember? Moses, okay. Elijah and Elisha. Was Elisha a really important prophet? Which one do we remember? Elijah. Mary and Joseph. Which one do we tend to remember? We tend to remember Mary. Mary tends to get all the attention. In Matthew, it's Joseph-centered. This is not so much about Mary. This is going to be about Joseph. He's the focus. If you notice verse 16, Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, by whom Jesus was born, who was called the Messiah. We're tracing the lineage through Joseph. If you look at verse 18, now the birth of Jesus Christ was as follows when his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph. And we're talking about the revelation that was given to Joseph. If you go into chapter 2, who's the main person? Is it Mary? Mary's not hardly in Matthew at all. When you go to Matthew's gospel, Joseph is going to be the main figure in the beginning. And why should that be? Who's his legal father? Jesus' legal father is... Turn your fingers over to John chapter 1. John 1 and verse 44. Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, we have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of who? The son of Joseph? Well, how did they know he was the son of Joseph?
Well, how would they know he was conceived by the Holy Spirit? Good.
Here's what I'm getting at. At this point in time, he's the son of Joseph. Son of God. Was that something that was apparent in the beginning? Or was that something revealed as time goes on and proven by what was transpiring? When they say son of Joseph, now either John the Baptist said, that's Jesus, the son of Joseph. Either they got it from John the Baptist or they got it from Jesus. Who are you? I'm Jesus, son of Joseph. Why would you introduce yourself as son of Joseph? Because all your life, everybody that's known you has known you as son of Joseph. He's the legal father. Pardon me? Public record, yeah. It would be son of Joseph. He's the carpenter's son. That's what he's known as. Now, so later on in life, you're a Christian talking to a Jewish guy, and I say, Jesus is the son of God. Oh, no. Jesus is the son of Joseph. Well, thanks. You just put him over the first hurdle, because when you said son of Joseph, son of David, son of Abraham. Now we'll pick up here next week.
Thanks for listening to the Clovis Church of Christ Sermon Podcast. For more information, please visit us at clovischurchofchrist.org.